Yanni, just firstly, thank you very much for doing this. Can I just firstly ask you about the show?
Oh,
About the show that no one's
which show?
going to see?
The old one that doesn't exist.
Oh, it's not old. Didn't have time to get old.
No, it's a new show, but it's funny. I've noticed I've started using the past tense when I'm talking about it, and that's been an interesting little few days. If you want to know about it, it was called Australia Says Welcome, Conditions Apply, and it was basically a show. Well, I lived in the UK for 15 years, and I moved back last year, so it was sort of like born out of just sort of seeing the country that I was born and grew up in with slightly fresh eyes, and having been away for so long, slightly feeling a little bit like a stranger in your own land. And so it was a show about feeling like you belong in a place. So uh, basically, I was doing that through stories. It was all stories. So some of the stories were my parents' stories that they told me from when they moved to Australia in the 50s, and some of the stories were my own stories when we went and lived in Cyprus, which is where my family's from, for a year when I was 15 years old. And then some of the stories were moving over to live in the UK and sort of like having to feel like you belong in a new place. And then, of course, that sort of led into some stories about Brexit, which is, a lot of that is about immigration, people feeling like the country's theirs or not, and then moving back here.
So, where were you when you got the
As in,
news that the
oh,
festival was cancelled?
I was at the Adelaide Fringe, and I was staying in a share house with Shana Noor and David Teague and Tara Dowler, and Shani and Dave do an act called The Two Little Dickheads, and yeah, we were all in this share house at Adelaide, and I mean, the thing was, I think we all kind of it got flagged a few days before, like you'd had about a 3 day lead in of watching major events get pulled, like I remember the NBA getting cancelled was the first big thing where I was like, oh wow, that's a very big call, and then the Premier League and Champions League, and then the Grand Prix was on that weekend, and so I wasn't like surprised when it happened, but I think there's a big difference between something being a theoretical thing where you go, oh, that's probably going to happen, and then when it actually happens, and then you need to start going through, oh, that means this and this and this and this, and then and I think we're all doing that collectively as a society at the moment, still kind of working out, oh, that means that this won't happen, and then working out what effects that means and what it means for all of us.
Well, what has been the impact of the cancellation of the festival on an emerging comedy talent such as yourself? Can you just unpack that for us?
People ask questions like, "Oh, were you invited to perform at the comedy festival?" Or if you're doing the Edinburgh Fringe, they go, "It must have been so great to be invited." And they don't realize, first of all, that it's an open access festival. So literally, even if they wanted to do a show and they had a place, a venue that was happy to put their show on it, that they could do that. And that the way it works essentially is that you have that venue. If you have to pay for that venue, you hire it, and that costs you a certain amount of money, whether that's a flat fee or a percentage of the amount of tickets that you sell. And then, of course, there's all the fees and charges that go around with it. So if you want to be part of the festival, you've got to register. So that's $500 odd. And of course, 2 days ago, every day feels like a week, I feel like at the moment. And a couple of days ago, everyone got an email from the comedy festival saying, unfortunately, since we've already done a lot of the things that your registration fee is paying for example, printing up signage and printing the guide, the festival guide, and blah blah blah, we won't be able to refund it to you. And then, as you can imagine, there was a big explosion of on social media because there was. I mean, and I said this on the radio on the ABC the other day, like what is the benefit? Like, is the benefit physically having ink in a book, being printed like that? Or is the benefit the fact that the book helps you to sell your show? Like, if there's no festival, well, you may as well print it like, on the pavement. Like, it just doesn't make any difference. And then literally 24 hours later, they reversed that decision. So these things are happening so fast. So, and then of course there's advertising that people pay for. And then, you can spend as much as you want. Like, when you're walking down Swanston Street and a tram goes past you and there's an image for someone's comedy festival show, well, they've paid for that, and those are all meant to be recouped by ticket sales, or or in the longer term, sometimes, the idea is, well, we might run this festival season at a loss, but hopefully if something good comes out of it work-wise, we might make that money back in the future. So it's always a balance between those two things. As you know, like going forward in an industry which generally almost exclusively relies on live performance in this new world where for the foreseeable future we won't be able to do that. Well, that income stream's just completely gone.
So you were performing this show at the Fringe in Adelaide?
No, I did it at the Fringe in Perth, so it's not like it's never been performed.
Okay.
But then I went to Adelaide for a week. Like, if you want the short long version, when I moved back home for various reasons, I took about 6 or 8 months off doing stand up, right? So, and then I started up again. Like, Perth was sort of like the first big thing that I'd done again. So I did the show there, and I wasn't going to go to Adelaide just because it's quite a difficult place to make a show profitable, just because there are a lot of shows. It's a great festival, but there are not that many people. Like, it's sort of like the number of shows is up, sort of not right up near Edinburgh, but it's not too far off. But at Edinburgh, you have millions of people come in from all around the world, and in Adelaide, you have the people in Adelaide generally. But then I just was in Perth, and I thought, oh, it's so good to be in a festival environment. I felt inspired being around other artistic people or whatever. So I thought, I'll just go up for 10 days and I'll try and do as many gigs as I can and just keep my hand in and network with people. So I wasn't actually performing a show, but I was watching a lot of people's shows.
So what will be the long-term impact on you? Because you don't work anymore, do you? You just do comedy.
Well, yeah, if you want to take a snapshot now, it's actually a weird one. Like, there's a few, like, for myself, like I said, well, when I was in the UK for the last 12 years, that's all I did. Is all I did was comedy. Most of that was live. Some of it every now and then was something on TV, but also, like, I would make a little bit of money here and there. Like, I do graphic design, so I would do that. And so, for example, there are things like that where, you start thinking, oh, well, I could sort of say to people, well, I know how to edit video. I know how to design posters. By the way, I do know how to do all of these things, so please get in touch. I used to be a lawyer, and I was like, actually, I came back here and my dad was like, oh, you can do a bit of work with me, because my dad's a lawyer as well. So, like, that's one of the things I could do. So I guess at the moment, everyone's kind of scrambling to try and find some income, whether it be from the government or from other means. Like, I think you'll find, like, comedians, a lot of them either had a job that they did before they became comedians, or they have various skills. Like, the poster design, I didn't do a course or anything. That's just over years of designing stuff for myself. I've gotten to a point where I'm pretty good at it now. So, like, because comedy is one of these sort of Renaissance arts, at least stand-up is, where you almost have to be a little bit of everything. You do find people with a wide variety of skills. But of course, poster design relies on there being things to design posters for. And it's not just the arts that's being affected now. Like, when people project forward, you're talking about, vast swathes of the economy that are going to be sort of rendered, just shut down almost for large amounts of time. So, it might not quite work out as simply as that.
So do you have any idea how the rest of the year is going to pan out for you? What, now that the festival part of your life has been removed?
Yeah, well, the original plan was to do Melbourne, and then I was going to do the show at Edinburgh Fringe. Now, that's up in the air at the moment, but my gut tells me that will not go ahead. So, I'm dealing with people who are working on that. And, as you have to do in business, you kind of have to progress as if it's going to happen until you know that it's not going to happen. So, everyone there is almost having the same conversations that we had with Melbourne a little while ago, where people were like, well, it's better if they make a call. That way everyone can have some certainty, because people sometimes are outlaying money already for things, and you may or may not be able to get that back. Like, for, say, something like Facebook ads, it's a bit far out, but a lot of people, the money you put in to advertise for stuff on Facebook, there's no way you're going to get that back. So, there's the uncertainty about that. So at the moment, I've kind of just pivoted, and I'm trying to just say I'm looking for the opportunities in it. Now, obviously, it's just a very different environment. So my personal thing is, from a comedy point of view, I'm just going to try and build my following online, which is where I guess a lot more people are going to be spending time, in anticipation of the time where we can go out and perform again, and then hopefully, there'll be a few more people who have seen stuff that I've produced. So this is obviously going to be a different type of thing. So I post on a few forums. I did a show about The Simpsons a few years ago, so I post on a few of these Simpsons forums, and people always have great advice. They're like, why don't you do a live stream of your stand-up? And I'm like, well, you can do that, but stand-up's sort of a social art form. It kind of relies on, the atmosphere and there being a crowd, and laughter is a contagious thing, probably the best contagious thing that's going around at the moment. And then you can tell that you've kind of made that person think that for the first time, because they're like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. So
when did you start in comedy?
Well, if you mean just comedy in general, sort of like at university. So I started doing I did a sketch comedy review, the law school review, and I've seen a video of it. I was terrible. Like, I can't watch it anymore. It's so bad because I was so awkward on stage. But you got to go through that and just get used to it. And then I did a lot of improvisation with a group called Improzac, who, there's a lot of people around that you'd know who are in that. Lawrence Leung, Andrew McClelland, Adam McKenzie, people like that. And
I guess when did you start getting paid for it? When did you make the shift to doing comedy full time?
2005.
Okay, so you're an up and comer. Is that fair to say?
This is literally the first joke in my show, Jim. I've got a joke where I basically say, maybe you guys see me on TV. And some people say yes, most people say no. I was on a show called Next Gen on the ABC a couple of years ago. So that's a show, Next Gen, that's designed to discover the next generation of up and coming Australian comedy talent. Right? Okay, it's not the only time I've been on TV in Australia. In 2001, I was on a show called Raw Comedy. Now, Raw Comedy is a show designed to find the next generation of up-and-coming Australian comedy talent. So, 2001 and 2019, that's a bloody long time.